Assessment and Evaluations. Part 1. Preparing exam questions. Before we enter the topic, let us first deal with several terminologies. First, you will need to know the differences between the assessment and evaluations. The two terms seem similar, but the meaning differs. Let us first look at the assessment. It is the process that identify, collect, use, and prepare data that can be used to evaluate achievement. Now, if you look at the evaluations, it is the process of reviewing the results of the data collected and analysis and make a determinations of a value of findings and actions to be taken. By looking at these descriptions, it may seem to be confusing. Simply said, the assessment is referring to collecting the data directly from the students in order to determine the level of achievement of that particular student through the learning. These are the examples of assessments. We have quiz or tests, we have assignment, we have final exam, we have presentations. All these are carried out in order to gauge the level of understandings of the student. Through a series of assessments here, we will know whether the students pass or fail the relevant course. This is about the assessment. As for the evaluations, we will review the results as obtained from all these assessments. We're going to analyze this result as a whole in order to evaluate the performance of the teaching and learning activities and to see that if any improvement required to make the teaching and learning better. Now, the focus of the evaluation, it will be the course itself instead of individual performance of the students. We want to know how effective is the delivery done by the lecturer. We want to know whether the course functioning well as a part of the program in the curriculum structure. We also want to know where are the focus of the improvement that may be imposed into the course in order to make the delivery to be more effective. These are some examples how the evaluations are done. There will be analysis regarding the CO and PO. CO stands for course outcome. PO stands for program outcome. This analysis is carried out in order to see if the program outcome is achieved after the students go through the entire program. There will also be evaluations at the course level, and then based on the evaluation outcome, CQI, which is continual quality improvement, is carried out. We're going to discuss in details regarding all this later in this module. At this moment, we will focus on the assessment, particularly how to prepare exam questions. Now, when we talk about the assessment, there are two main types of assessment. We have formative assessment and summative assessment. The formative assessment is the assessment given to the student in order to monitor the progress of the students throughout a course. There shall be feedbacks given to the students in order to help the students to improve their attainment. The ultimate purpose here is to enhance the performance of the students in the course. This is different from the summative assessment. The summative assessment is to summarize the progress of the learner at a particular time, and this is normally conducted towards the end of the semester. The summative assessment is conducted in order to determine the grade of the students. Now the ultimate goal here is to assess the performance of the students in that particular course. If you find difficulty to differentiate these two, you can associate the formative assessment with progress monitoring and performance enhancement. As for the summative assessment, it will be the performance assessment. These are the examples for the formative assessment. We have quiz, progress tests, assignment, presentations. This kind of assessment is normally conducted within the semester, where the lecturer has the opportunity to give feedback to the students in terms of the mistake done by the students, area of improvement that the students need to pay attention. This assessment is conducted to quickly gauge the achievement of the student, for the lecturer to know the problems of the students and make the rectification so that the students can improve. As for the summative assessment, this shall include final exam, capstone project, and thesis. These are normally conducted at the end of the semester. Knowing the performance of the students, out of this assessment here, there is no additional time for the students to improve. These assessments are meant for grading. If the students fail the final exam, that means the students cannot cope with the course, and the students will have to come back for the course in the following semester. Now, talking about the formative assessment, as a lecturer, we will have to make this kind of assessment really formative. Every time when you have progress tests or quiz, or when you give assignment, or when you conduct the presentation section, you must provide feedback to the student. Give comments to the students how they can improve, where are their problems, and so on so forth. And that is the purpose of the formative assessment. A typical course should have both formative and summative assessment. The formative or summative assessment cannot stand alone. Having the entire course with formative assessment, there may be a problem in determining their final achievement in the course, as you are monitoring the attainment of the students throughout the semester. This may not be fair to the student. Now, having the summative assessment alone in the course, that means you do not know the progress of the students. You don't get timely feedbacks to the student. You may not be sensitive enough to detect whether the students can follow through the teaching and learning activity, to know the problems of the students. By the time you see the result of the students, it is already too late. By then, there is no room for the rectifications. That's why, ideally, a course should have both formative and summative assessment. Now, let us talk about the purpose of assessment. Assessment plays an important role in driving learnings of students. Therefore, assessment is one of the important parts in education. This has been embraced by the educators. Quote, assessment drives learning. Assessment reinforces learning. Since it reinforces the learning, it needs to be well aligned with the teaching. If it is not well aligned, now you are reinforcing the learning at the wrong direction. That's why the course learning outcome, the teaching and learning activities, and the assessment must be properly aligned. Now, if any one of these is not well aligned, the entire thing will collapse. It is difficult to hit the purpose of that particular course, as well as the purpose of education. It was also said that the assessment method and requirement probably have the greatest influence on how and what students learn than the other single factor. It means that the assessment method as well as the requirement will ultimately set the standard of that particular course. Because of the existence of the assessment, students learn hard, and this reinforces learning. And if everything is well aligned, now the entire course can meet the purpose, and the requirements set in the assessment will have direct influence in terms of the level of achievement as well as the standards of that particular course. Since we talk about the alignment between the course learning outcome, teaching and learning activities, and the assessment, let us look at the golden triangle, which is famously known in the academic field. First, we have the course learning outcome. This one defines the purpose of that particular course. The learning outcome for that particular course will be strongly correlated to the purpose of that course. The course learning outcome defines the breadth and depth, the focus and the emphasis of that particular course. What you want the students to learn through the course, this shall be clearly specified, and the relevant statements are known as the course learning outcome. A typical course will have 3 to 4 learning outcomes. Some special course in the final year may have more learning outcome. Now, if you are given a course to teach, the first thing that you need to know, it will be the course learning outcome. Through the learning outcome, you know the focus and the emphasis. How about the depth of that particular outcome? Remember previously we talked about the Bloom's taxonomy. There are 3 main domains here: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Each domain will have different levels of thinking orders, and these are normally implied in the learning outcome. By studying the statements in the learning outcome, you will know the levels of thinking order as expected from that particular course. You will also know the emphasis of that particular course. Let's say we take this course as an example. The course here is hydrology, which is one of the courses offered in the Bachelor of Civil Engineering program. Given the details and specifications of the course, there will be a list of learning outcomes. Let's say for this case here, we have 4 learning outcomes. You have CO1, CO2, CO3, and CO4. Every single learning outcome will have one statement clearly stating the level of thinking order as well as the focus of that particular course. For the first course outcome here, evaluate the components and the potential problem arose within the hydrological cycle. Now, if you look at the terminology here, evaluate, that means it is looking at the cognitive level 5. And then you may look at the definitions of evaluating. You will see there will be components of evaluations: judgment, personal input related to the components and the problems within the hydrological cycle. Let's say now we look at the CO4, develop solutions for surface drainage and the hydrological problem. By looking at the terminology here, we know that we are looking at the highest level of the cognitive domain. That means the students are expected to formulate new solutions based on the existing knowledge and skills. Now, these solutions are meant to resolve the problem related to the surface drainage and also related to hydrology. By looking at the statements of the course learning outcome, you will know the levels of achievement that you would like to assess the student. This is about the course learning outcome. Now you know the requirement and the focus of the course. Your teaching and learning activity should try to achieve this. All your teaching should emphasize on the right area, and you will need to guide and facilitate the students towards the respective levels of thinking order. Let's say now you are dealing with CO4 here. When you talk about finding the solutions for these two types of problem, you will need to make sure they have the ability to develop solutions. Teaching them how to apply certain principles is not enough. Teaching them how to analyze the problem is also not enough. Since here already specified level 6, then you will have to teach up to level 6. This is so that your teaching and learning activity in line with the course learning outcome. There are various types of activity that you can carry out in order to facilitate or stimulate learning of the students. This include lecture, lab work, assignment, tutorial, oral presentations, cooperative learning, problem-based learning, and so on and so forth. Now, whichever method that you use for the teaching and learning, this is flexible. As a lecturer, you will choose a method which can help you to deliver the knowledge effectively. The focus, emphasis, breadth and depth, this will have to abide to the course learning outcome. Next, we talk about the assessment. The assessment will have to be based on the course learning outcome here. The course learning outcome will state the scope of the assessment. At the same time, it is also stating the level of assessment. Taking this as an example again, when come to the assessment for CO1, make sure you assess up to C5. As for CO2, you only need to assess up to C4. You are allowed to assess anything below C5. Make sure the highest level of assessment it will be C5. You may also choose not to assess C1 and C2, only focusing on C3, C4 and C5. Or you can go straight to C5 entirely. This one is up to you. The flexibility is there. Only you are not allowed to assess lower than C5. I mean for this particular course outcome. Same goes to the others. If the course outcome here stating level 6 here, the highest that you need to assess it will be level 6. If you are doing the assessment only on C1 and C2, there will be misalignment in terms of the course learning outcome and the assessment. This is about the alignment between the course learning outcome and the assessment. Now, let's say that there are so many topics under the hydrology course. There is one chapter which you feel is important, but not covered in any of these course outcome. Theoretically, you don't have to assess that particular topic. That topic might end up to be redundant in this course. There are two possibilities. It is either that particular topic is important, somehow it was missed and not stated in any of the course outcome. If this happens, a review will need to be carried out for this particular course. Make sure the relevant topics are being incorporated within the course outcome. As long as it is not there in the course outcome, you do not need to assess that. The second possibility it will be that particular topic is not important, then it should be removed from the syllabus. The principle is that there should be a good alignment between the course learning outcome and the assessment. The assessment should also be well aligned with the teaching and learning activities. What you intend to assess from the student, there should be relevant teaching and learning activity to deliver the relevant knowledge. You cannot teach one topic here, assess another topic here. This misalignment here will defeat the purpose of the teaching and learning activities. That's why we are talking about all three things here should be properly aligned. As for the examples of the assessment, there are written tests, practical tests, presentations, and other assessment techniques. In terms of the mode of assessment, it will be very much dependent on the situations. You will need to choose the most suitable one that is likely to give you the most accurate measurement in terms of the level of understanding or achievement of the students. You will also need to look into the nature of that particular scope of assessment. If it is psychomotor based, probably you will have to go for the practical test. If it is cognitive based, then the written test will be more appropriate.